The time has finally come. I'm here to do my comprehensive guide to Terra Moon's Cosmetics Single Shadows. I've had hundreds, thousands, if not millions of people knocking down my door asking me when I would be posting this video, and finally I am here to share it. Let's get one thing out of the way before we get into any of the content. So I am biased. I am biased towards Terra Moons. I started as a customer in 2020 and I have purchased a large portion of my collection myself. However, starting in July 2022, I started receiving PR from Terra Moons and doing paid swatches for their website. You may see my swatches on some of the products. It's important for me to distinguish that this is not the same kind of bias as if I were to have an affiliate code with Terra Moons. I don't benefit in any way if you make a purchase or use my discount code, but nonetheless the bias exists and it's important for me to disclose that right away. I did tell the owner of Terra Moons that I was making this video because I reached out to ask a few clarifying questions, but other than that there is no involvement from the brand in this video. It's not sponsored and should not be considered an official endorsement of the products. So let's start with the basics. What is Terra Moons? Terra Moons Cosmetics, I'm quoting this from their website, is a Latina owned, handmade, cruelty-free indie brand that creates high quality beauty products for all makeup lovers. They're best known for their single shadows, but they also do sell highlighters, lip gloss, brushes, and empty palettes. They've had a few limited edition palettes, but this video is just going to focus on their single shadows. Last bit of housekeeping, I want to talk to you about their discount codes and rewards program because they have made some changes recently. So I do have a discount code, as I previously stated. It's not an affiliate code. I don't earn anything if you use it. It just saves you 15% on most but not all items. So I just went onto their website about an hour ago and created a cart with one item from each category on their website and applied my code to see which it would apply to. So as of today, April 30th, it appears to apply to the Shimmers, Mattes, Duochromes, Chameleon shadows, Extreme Multichromes, but not the Extreme Multichromes that fall under the Lunar Luxe category. I will get more into that as I go through each category, but just know that before we go into it. Another important thing to note, they just changed their rewards program and it's going into effect May 1st, 2023. They used to have a program where every $1 spent equals 1 point. They changed it to now being every $5 spent equals 1 point. So every 10 points you earn equals $1 off, but you can only redeem it in certain increments. I don't know all the increments right now because they are going to change them starting May 1st, but I know the smallest will be $5. Let's go ahead and start. I'm calling this category the traditional shimmers because these all have a pretty finely milled small particle size and a buttery smooth feel. They have more of a metallic finish rather than like PC and sparkly. Some are more reflective than others. Some I would consider more of like a satin type metallic finish. They're all pretty opaque. Some can be sheared out, some not so much. But overall, these are more of what you would expect from like a metallic in a palette, just the indie version. So some of the shades in all of these categories are discontinued, and I won't be doing a dedicated swatch segment on each of those, but I will include them in the comparisons in case you have one and want to see it in the context of other shadows. Starting off, we have Cerise Waves, and anything with an asterisk is one I received in PR. The brand describes this as a vibrant, smooth shimmer as close to true red as we can get, and I agree. It's like a very, very saturated primary red, has more of like a satiny metallic finish. Really beautiful. I love using this type of shade for building depth in a look. I would use it almost in place of a matte. It's very opaque. I haven't been able to shear it out, but it does blend nicely along the edges, so it does perform as a matte. Serious is described by the brand as a vibrant orange coral shimmer. In my notes, I describe it as a mid-tone cooler orange. I find it to be more metallic and reflective than some of the other shimmers. It almost has like a pearliness to it. Really pretty shade, not too much to say about it. Castor is described by the brand as a chartreuse yellow shimmer. In my notes, I say this is a chartreuse shimmer that is not quite as opaque as some of the other shimmers. It can be sheared out really nicely, and it has more of a satin finish rather than like straight up metallic. I'm surprised by how much use I've gotten out of this. I am reaching for it all the time. I love to use it for the inner corner or to kind of like diffuse a more colorful look. This is probably my favorite of all of the Terra Moon's traditional shimmer shades. Adhara is described as a vibrant blurple shimmer. I don't really see the purple part of it. I see this more as a very, very saturated primary blue, almost like jewel tone. It is so vibrant and opaque. This is a really great one for building up depth and intensity in a look, and this has more of like a not super reflective metallic, more of a satiny metallic finish. Moon Lily is described as a foiled lavender gray. This is like one of the OG Terra Moon shades from back in the day. This is one of the first shades I ever added to my collection. It's really pretty. I think of it more of as like a denim blue. I don't use it too often anymore, but I think it's a really unique shade and it's very reflective. Dark Matter is described as a turquoise brown shifting shade that is absolutely magical. So in my notes, I describe it as like a taupey brown base, and then it has a cool tone blue on top, if that makes sense. I honestly picked this up a long time ago because it was hard for me to understand what it actually looks like. It feels pretty thin and not fully opaque. I like to use this as a building block for a look. Like I'll put this down and then I'll put something more sparkly on top of it. I think there are similar shades within Terra Moon's own range that I prefer more than this. Dione is described as a periwinkle shimmer. I would consider this more of a like lavender purple than periwinkle personally. It has that more reflective finish similar to Sirius. And one important thing to note is this stains very hot pink, and it will last for like 2 days on me. I just wasn't expecting it with such a cool tone shade, but just something to be aware of. Starlit is described as a muted rose shimmer with hints of a taupe like gold. So yeah, this is like, I consider it more of like a very muted lilac almost, and it has that flip to a very soft muted gold. Really pretty. Again, it has that like pearly finish almost. Very underrated shade. This is probably another one of my favorites from their regular shimmers. Okay, next up I have grouped together the special shimmers and then the duochromes, and I have these grouped together because I find they have pretty similar textures and finishes. They all have at least some texture to them and pieciness / sparkliness. I find that in general, the more special shimmers and duochromes are severely slept on from Terra Moons because they have so many of these like insane shifting multichromes, but these are all so beautiful and some of my absolute favorites are in these categories. Another thing I have noted is that a lot of these duochromes, they are listed as and priced as duochromes, but some of them have multiple shifts, like they would be considered technically a multichrome. So that's just another reason why I think they are very underrated and worth checking out, especially since they are at that lower price point. Meteorite is described as a golden pink shimmer with hints of green. I would describe this as more of like a muted soft peach that shifts to a soft golden green. It's semi-sheer and sparkly, but not necessarily textured. Very versatile shade. I will say it's not the most unique. I have a version of this from a few other brands just with slightly different textures. So you may have a dupe of this in your collection, but if you don't, it's very versatile and easy to use. Axis is described as an orangey coral with a blue and pink shifts. So this has like that pretty opaque orangey coral base, and then the sparkles mixed in shift from teal to blue to purple. This is absolutely one of my top recommendations from the entire Terra Moons lineup, to be honest with you. One of my absolute favorite shades. It is so sparkly and juicy and wet looking on the eyes. I use it all the time, and I'm not even an orange eyeshadow girly, but I just love it so much. It has almost something similar going on to it as Ice Blink from my collab, in that it has that orange base and then the shifting pigment on top. The difference is Ice Blink has the base is an iridescent multichrome, whereas the base of this is an orange pigment. But maybe if Ice Blink was not in your price range, you might want to check this out. You could achieve kind of a similar effect. Overall, really recommend this one. I love it so much. Lightspeed is described as a baby yellow with blue and purple shifts. This has kind of a similar thing going on as Axis in that it has that base and then the shifting sparkles on top. The yellow base is very sheer, but it does play a role in how it shows up. It's really unique in my opinion. Just don't expect the yellow base to be very apparent. It's a really great topper shade. Very sparkly finish, and I would say it shifts from a blue to purple to pink, and you do see that yellow peeking through, especially from an angle. Hot Spice Cider is described as a unique gold green with hints of brown metallic. I would say this has like a warm reddish brown base And it shifts from like a brassy gold to green to blue. This is an iconic shade from Terra Moons. If you were around back in the day, you know what I'm talking about. Like, this was the shade. Like, it was the best seller. I don't know if it still is, but for the longest time it was their best seller. And it is so pretty. Like, when I was swatching this, I was like, why don't I wear this more? It's because I'm not a gold eyeshadow girly, but it is so pretty. I would think of it as more of an elevated everyday shade. It's not super textured or sparkly at all, but it does have a little bit something extra to it. Cesium is described as a metallic gold with green undertones. You already know I freaking love this shade. I love all the shades that come in this formula. They're so insanely beautiful and underrated. I will scream it from the rooftops every single day. They are so sparkly and reflective, and I like that they're not like foiled, if that makes sense. Like, they're more dimensional and piecey. The closest formula I have is the Rose Gold 005 in the Mothership Bronze Seduction, but that one is not as textured or sparkly. Serpents is described as a duochrome that has a light green base with blue and a hint of pink shift. This one I describe as having a pale pastel lime green base, which is pretty sheer. Then it has those sparkles that we've seen before that shift from a blue, purple, pink. You don't see too much of that green once you apply it. It's more of, like I said, a sheer base, but it does impact how it looks, and you see it from an angle. This one I thought would be really similar to Prismatic from JD Glow, which is a brand a lot of us no longer support. The main difference is the base is a lot more sheer. With Prismatic, it's a lot more of a intense lime green base, but it is similar vibes. I'm going to do all the Amazon exclusive shades together because I know one is already discontinued and I don't know what's going to happen with the other two. The blue one is Magnetosphere, the green one is Radial Velocity, and the pink one is called Aphelion. That's the one that was discontinued. They're very much giving Powerpuff Girl all together. So my favorite of these three is Aphelion, which is unfortunately the discontinued one. The other two are pretty. They're pretty on par with the other duochrome formulas from Terra Moons. The base is moderately opaque, and then they have the sparkles that shift. Pretty textured and sparkly, but I think if you missed out on these, I don't know if they're discontinued yet, there are plenty of similar shades available on the website that can achieve the same vibe. Half Moon is described as a turquoise lilac shimmer, and I describe it as a very sheer teal base that shifts blue and purple. This is nearly identical to one of their iridescents called Atlas, so just put a pin on that because I will compare them later. This is the third time I've recorded this, and every time I say pin on that, so I'm just going with it. But anyway, put a pin in that. The base is very sheer and it's pretty sparkly, but not as chunky or textured as some of the other shades. It's a good multi-purpose shade, like it could be an inner corner, topper, or just all over the lid shade. Rhea is described as a bright baby blue duochrome that shifts green and teal. Very reflective and sparkly. And I describe it as a warm pastel sky blue that shifts teal and blue. It's soft to the touch and very sparkly. Kind of a sheer base, not as sheer as some of the others we've gone over before. And has a smallish medium particle size. Not as shifty as some of the other duochromes because, as you can see, all the shifts are in that blue family. So on the eyes, it reads more as just like a very dimensional and sparkly shade. Terra Borealis is described as a duochrome shade that shifts colors in the light. Okay, not a very helpful description. Anyway, I describe it in my notes as a mid-tone saturated terracotta base with shifts from teal to blue to purple. Very sparkly and pretty opaque. This is a great one for neutral lovers. This is not the most unique shade. I think there are a few other brands that have their own version of this, but if you are looking for a shade like this from Terra Moons, I think you'll really enjoy it. Great for a one and done look because it has that depth from the base, but then it has the lightness and dimension from the sparkly shifting pigment. Interstellar is described as a duochrome with blue, pink, purple shimmer. This has a cool tone, mid-tone brown base and shifts from blue to purple and a tiny bit of magenta from a harsh angle. So when I was talking about dark matter, I said there was another version of this that I prefer. This is what I was referring to. So you see it has that same kind of blue-brown thing going on, but it's much more reflective and impactful. I just think you can achieve something very similar to dark matter, but this is more special in my opinion. So this isn't really a sparkly shade, but it does have some texture and a lot of dimension to it. This is another really great one and done, or one I would recommend for neutral lovers. Multiverse is described as a purple, blue, gray, silver, sparkly shadow. So I would consider this more of like a warm navy blue that shifts purple and pink, and it does have some flecks of silver. This texture is not the most user-friendly. It's flaky, but not opaque. So it can achieve a really, really beautiful like galaxy effect on your eyes. I like to use it as a topper shade, but I would not consider it to be a beginner-friendly shade. I know it's kind of a polarizing texture, so just be aware of that. Wormhole is described as a grungy gray-green shimmer with blue and purple shifts. This one to me is very, very similar to Multiverse. It's a bit more muted and lighter. The biggest difference though is in the texture. So Wormhole definitely has more of a base. It's flaky and pretty dry. Not my favorite texture, to be honest, and there's one other shade I'll point out that has the same texture. It's just a lot more dry feeling than the other shades in their lineup, and I feel like it doesn't really apply well without a tacky base, and I don't always love to use a tacky base. So not my favorite texture. I definitely prefer Multiverse over this one. And when I say dry, I don't mean in the same way that like Shine by SD shadows are dry. I mean like it's hard to get it to actually stick to your eyelid. So kind of different. I think it might have to do with the particle size, but just be aware of that. Moonshine is described as a sheer silvery metallic shadow with pink and purple shifts. I personally would not describe this as a metallic shadow. I would say it's more of like a sheer dimensional sparkly shade. Really unique. It's kind of hard to describe. It almost has like a yellow flip to it, but in my notes I describe it as a light neutral silver with pink, blue, silver sparkles that shifts to blue, pink, and a tiny bit of gold. To me, it feels a bit thicker than some of the other Duochromes. It's got more like girthiness to it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does spread out really easily, and I think it's a good topper shade. X-Ray is described as a violet blue shimmer, and in my notes I describe it as a light cool blue that shifts indigo and purple. It's quite sheer and sparkly. It's actually not too different than Moonshine, but it doesn't have those multicolored sparkles, and it definitely reads more as a straight up blue from straight on. So while this does look like a blue eyeshadow in the pan, I would say it definitely performs and functions the same way that an iridescent would. So if you have an iridescent eyeshadow that has these like blue purple shifts, I don't think you need this. I don't know if Terra Moons has an iridescent equivalent to this in their own lineup, but if they do, I do not own it. Star Sign is described as a duochrome blue, purple, green. And those black flecks that you see in there are not part of the eyeshadow. Those are actually fibers from the carpet at my old apartment because I dropped it and I didn't want to let go. So I literally was picking it out of my carpet. I will not be acknowledging any judgment. Thank you. So I describe this as a moderately opaque mid-tone periwinkle blue base with shifts to blue, purple, green. Although when I'm looking at this here, I see a little bit of gold too. Very sparkly, but not super textured. The particle size is on the smaller side. Calypso is described as a duochrome that has a medium purple base with pink and a hint of blue shift, similar to Star Sign formula. So I don't know if they meant by formula like it's literally the exact same thing as Star Sign but with a deeper base, but that's how I describe it. So it's everything I said about Star Sign apply to this, but the base has more depth and it is more opaque. You definitely don't need both. I think I do prefer Calypso out of the two. I think even though I gravitate towards lighter, more sheer shadows, something about this is a lot more appealing to me. But I don't think you can really go wrong with either if you enjoy this type of shade. Just don't get both. Lunar Lavender is described as a metallic lavender with bits of silver, pink, and blue sparkle. So I don't really know what Terra Moons means by metallic when they use that, because I don't really agree like anytime they use it. But I feel like this is more like dimensional and sparkly than anything once again. I describe it as a mid-tone lavender with pink, blue, silver sparkles. It does not have any shifts. However, it does have a lot of dimension. Like from straight on, it's very light, and then it goes into that mid-tone deep lavender on the side. So it makes a fantastic one and done shadow. Also good to add a little bit of spiciness to a look. This is definitely one I would recommend. It does have a bit of a thicker formula, kind of like Moonshine, but again, it does spread out really easily in my opinion. Rosette is described as a duochrome that has a very light, sheer, pinky purple base with light blue gold shift and lots of sparkle. I describe it as a muted mauvey pink with teal, gold, green, purple sparkles and shifts from gold to teal. Very PC and sparkly. This is another one that has crept up as such a favorite for me. One of my absolute top recommendations. I use it so often. I like mix it in with other shadows, or I use it as a topper or one and done. Absolutely love it. And I also think of it as a kind of grungier, muted version of the next shade I'm going to show you. But like I said, there are so many bangers in the duochromes and like special shimmers. Do not sleep on them. Starburst is described as a pink, green, gold, lilac, sparkly shadow. So this is one that was actually part of my very first ever Terra Moons order. Then I dropped it and lost it in a tragedy, was not able to recover. I'm a klutz, leave me alone. Anyway, so in one of my recent Terra Moons orders, they like randomly included this as a gift. And I was like, oh my god, I was so excited because I was missing it. So anyway, I describe this as a muted neutral pink base that shifts gold, green, teal. This is like the epitome of wet looking, juicy, delicious shadow. It is so sparkly, but like just looks wet and glossy on your eyes. Highly recommend this one. Hydra is described as a reddish orange with blue shifts, and I describe it as a muted warm magenta that shifts blue, purple, pink. This has that same formula as Wormhole that I describe. It's like kind of flaky and dry, not my favorite. I do really love the colors of this one though. Like I feel like it reminds me of that one shade from the first Mothership palette. I forget the name, but it's like the very top corner in the Blitz Astral portion. I bought this out of pure curiosity because I was having a hard time picturing what it actually looks like. So hopefully my swatch and description kind of helps you understand. I will also do plenty of comparisons later on. Celestial Petal is described as a pale pink with purple and blue shifts. I describe it as a sheer light pastel baby pink base with blue, purple, pink sparkles. Very sparkly and sheer. It's going to function the same way that as Lightspeed that I showed you earlier will, in that it has that like very sheer base that you kind of see through, but mostly it's just like a topper shade. Deimos is described as a metallic blush rose shadow. I describe this as a rose gold that is more saturated and warmer than a shade called Palladium, which I will show you later. And it does have that same formula as those super sparkly shades that I love. It does feel a tiny bit more dense to me, and that could just be me nitpicking, but I would say it's not like spot on, but very similar. I think it's intended to be the same type of formula. Halley's Comet is described as a duochrome with lots of sparkle that has a bright pink base and blue shifts. I describe it as a semi-opaque hot pink base, and it shifts from blue to purple. I remember when I received this launch in PR, I was like losing my mind over the shade because I don't know if it's going to translate here, but it's like Barbie vomited all over you. It is so sparkly and so pink in person. It's absolutely a standout. I mean, I don't know how many of these like pink shades you need, but this one is really fantastic. It looks so vibrant and sparkly on the eyes. I really enjoy it. Lost in Space is described as a bright, deep pink, sparkly duochrome with blue and purple shifts. I describe it as a vibrant, fully saturated fuchsia base that is pretty opaque, and it has blue to purple shifts. This one is not as like bright sparkly as some of the others, but it's really unique in my opinion. I don't have anything quite like this in my collection, like nothing quite as deep and vibrant pink with those shifts. This would look so cool in a look with Halley's Comet. I need to do that. Rubidium is described as a metallic taupe gold. This is another one of those very sparkly boys that I love. I think taupe gold is pretty accurate, but to me this just reads as like the most neutral out of any of the shades in this range. If you're struggling to decide which one of these shades to get and you only want to get just one, I would say go with Rubidium. It's probably the safest bet because it's going to go with most things. It's grounded in that way, but I really don't think you can go wrong with any of them. Palladium is described as a metallic blush gold, and yeah, I describe it as a rose gold too. Like I said, it's pretty similar to Deimos, it's just more muted and lighter. This is probably my most used out of any of these like super sparkly shades. I just love anything that's kind of pink, but I like to take these with a more flimsy brush that has a little bit of toothiness to it and use them as more of like a wash over my eyes. It's so beautiful. They look good applied fully opaque too. That's just not really my style. Mocha Twilight is described as a deep bronze metallic. I think of it more as like a minky, deep taupey brown shade. And I think this is supposed to be a similar formula to like Palladium, Rubidium, and Cesium. However, I don't think it is. It feels a lot more dense and hard pressed to me. And I don't know if that's just how the pigment is, but it's definitely not the same. But I do think this is a pretty shade. Carbon is described as a steel gray sparkly shadow. This has that same formula as Multiverse I described to you earlier, in that it's flaky and doesn't really build up. Like, you're never going to get an opaque layer of this unless you seriously pack it on over a tacky base. But this I would think of as more for someone who likes more like editorial, grungy, kind of like lived in makeup. Very cool shade. It's just not going to be for everyone. Dark Side is described as a deep gray charcoal sparkly shadow. This is basically the same thing as Carbon, just a little bit deeper. These shadows have been the one thing that have stopped me from buying that one Pat McGrath Mothership palette, I think 3, because that eyeshadow in there, they have one that looks like that and it's so appealing to me, but I already have it, I feel like. Anyway, yeah, same thing I said to Carbon, just apply to this, it's just a little bit deeper. So Chameleons are described as a blend between a multichrome and regular eyeshadow. Generally, they will have 3 shifts to them and they are priced at the middle of the price range. I definitely consider them all to be straight up multichromes. The main difference between Chameleons and extreme multichromes, in my opinion, is that these all have more of a tame texture. Like, none of them have a super large particle size. There is some variation, which I will get into, but also they're just not as intensely shifting as the extreme multichromes. Crimson Eclipse is described as a magenta, orange, and yellow shifting chameleon shade. I would describe it as a cooler tone red with gold and pink sparkles that shifts orange to gold. Very shiny and sparkly. This is not a super unique type of multichrome, but I think this is my favorite version just because it has that extra dimension and sparkle from those different flecks. It's mostly opaque and has a small particle size, but those flecks that are mixed in are slightly larger. Space Drifter is described as a reddish purple chameleon shadow that has a green and gold shift, and I describe it as a deep, like winey tone maroon that shifts to gold and an emerald green. It's more of a smooth finish, not necessarily super shiny or reflective, but this is so unique. I do not have anything like this in my collection, and I never hear anyone talk about this shade, but I find it to be quite special and weird in just the right way. Exoplanet is described as a grungy grayish-green multichrome that shifts to purple and teal with hints of soft gold, and I describe it as a blackened green base that shifts pink to gold to green with some flecks of different colored sparkles mixed in. This again has more of a smooth finish rather than super shiny or reflective. This is actually kind of similar to some of the extreme multichromes that we will go over later. It's just a more like softened version. So maybe if you like those shades and you aren't into the texture or flakiness, you might be interested in this. Gamma Ray is described as a reddish bronze chameleon with hints of green, and I have it described as a brick red base that shifts from gold to green to blue to purple. It has a ton of different colored sparkle flecks mixed in, and the finish is very reflective and sparkly. This is such an underrated shade. I don't hear many people talking about this one either, but it is so beautiful. Like, such a good spicy neutral bronze, and then it has that like almost oil slick effect with the way it shifts. It is so beautiful. I think of it as like the bronzy warm version of a shade we'll go over later called Veil Nebula, so just put a pin in that. But yeah, I think if you're a spicy neutral lover, you would really love this shade. Pollux is described as a yellow base with orange and red shifts and a hint of green, and I describe it as a marigold yellow that shifts from hot pink to orange to gold and a slight green shift. Not all of the particles in this shadow shift. It's like sparkles that are mixed in that shift, and then some of them stay yellow, if that makes sense. I'm not a huge fan of the formula of this one, to be honest with you. I don't know how to describe it other than like spiky. Like, it doesn't feel soft. The like flakes do not feel enjoyable to put on my eyes, so I personally cannot recommend this formula, but there aren't too many shades that have this formula, luckily. Cosmic Noon is described as a gold olive grungy, quote, wearable, unquote, multichrome that shifts from soft pink to gold to green. I describe it as a muted olive green base that shifts pink to gold to green, has a smooth, shiny finish, and is relatively opaque. I think if you have a similar style and preference to me, you would really like this, but if you're like someone who wants a very, very high impact, you know, like super intense eye look, you probably are not going to enjoy this one because it is a softer, more subtle type of eyeshadow, so just be aware of that, but I personally really enjoy this one. Critical Mass is described as a soft, warm green base multichrome with yellow, teal, and blue shifts. It has a vibrant and reflective finish, and I describe it as an opaque lime green base that shifts gold to green to teal. I personally hate this tone of green. It's nothing to do with the actual eyeshadow, it's just me disliking this like lime green tone, so I can't give an unbiased opinion about this. I mean, if you like this type of eyeshadow, you might enjoy this, but I just don't. And it's just because of the color. I do agree that it is reflective and shiny though. Quasar is described as a vibrant lime green with pink and purple shifts, and I describe it as a pastel mint green base that shifts from cool tone pink, gold, green. Has a shiny, sparkly finish. I'm actually wearing this today. I was reminded of how pretty it is. It's perfect spring shade, but it actually reminds me a lot of the shade Teal from Glam Shop. I'll have to compare them soon. Enceladus is described as a muted silvery blue green chameleon with lavender shifts and hints of green. I describe it as a soft silvery aqua sheer base that shifts gold, green, teal, and some purple. Important to note, the shifts are subtle. It's not like a super intense shifting shadow. If you watch my other videos, you've probably heard me talk about the shade so many times by now. This has quickly become one of my absolute favorites from Terra Moons. The texture and finish of this is very unique to Terra Moons lineup. It almost reminds me of some of the shades I went over earlier, like Cesium and Rubidium, but it's more lightweight, I guess would be the right word for that. And obviously it has the multichrome shifts, and it has a few different colored flecks of sparkles mixed in. Really great topper shade, or it can be a one and done. If you have a similar style to me, you would absolutely love this. La Lune is described as a green, bronze, pink chameleon shadow with a deep teal base, and I describe it as a black and teal base that shifts from rosy mauve to gold to green to teal. It's shiny with different colored sparkle flecks and mostly opaque. If you know, you know, this was my all-time favorite multichrome ever for quite a while. It was recently dethroned by my own collab shadows, but this I cannot recommend enough. I love it so much, and I'm not even someone who likes like deep base eyeshadows, but something about this is endlessly appealing to me, and I love the way it looks on the eyes. It can be diffused along the edges for a one and done look, or you can pair it with honestly so many different tones. I think this would be a good one to include if you're ordering for the first time from Terra Moons. I think you get the experience of the chameleon shadow and kind of like the weirdly unique and grungy tones that they are so good at. Neptune's Diamonds is described as a dark blue chameleon with purple and green and silver shifts. I describe it as a deep teal that shifts gold, green, teal, blue. It's very sparkly and dimensional. It has a lot of different colored flecks of sparkles. I don't think I've ever fully appreciated how pretty this is, but when I was swatching it for this video, I was kind of taken aback by just how much it has going on. This was from their summer 2022 release, which had a lot of those like super intense flaky shades, so I think it got overshadowed by those. I definitely prefer this type of like smoother, shiny, sparkly formula, so this is a really good one, and I definitely plan to use it a lot more. I'm glad I swatched it to remind myself how pretty it is. Sarah's is described as a muted gray-blue chameleon with gold and lavender shifts and hints of green. I describe it as a pastel muted periwinkle / denim blue base that shifts orange gold chartreuse. This is a very soft and smooth multichrome. Has very similar vibes to Sundog from my collab with Shine by SD, but they are different. Sundog has a deeper, more like purpley base and a more fiery orange shift. This has more of like a soft orange, but they have a similar concept. Really perfect for just like an effortless, pearly, reflective eye look. I think it almost reminds me of the pearlescent formula from Clionadh, but like the Terra Moons version. Moontide is described as an indigo violet base that shifts light blue, lavender, and pink with hints of silver. I describe it as a deep purpley indigo base with different colored sparkle flecks, and it shifts from gold, green, teal, blue. Very sparkly and reflective finish. Actually reminds me a lot of Neptune's Diamonds, but like the purple version. This is one of the OG very first chameleons that Terra Moons ever released, and I think it has really stood the test of time. Like, it stands up to a lot of the multichromes that are being released even to this day. Celestial Cloudscape is described as a deep blurple with lots of pink, purple sparkle and soft shifts to green. I describe it as a rich royal blue base, and then it has like dispersed sparkles on top that shift from hot pink to orange to gold to green. This is very unique in that it does look like almost like you put down a satiny blue shade and then layered like a sheer topper multichrome on top. Like, it really does look like two separate shadows, but it is all mixed together in one. So it's really cool. I don't even know how to describe the texture. It's like smooth, but also sparkly. Just overall, such a unique shade. And I think this was like a really big bestseller in this release. And I understand why. It's so cool. Chasing Comets is described as a purple chameleon shadow with blue, green, and gold shifts with a blue-purple base. I describe it as a deep grape purple base that shifts pink, orange, gold, green. I think it was Cass, it's Casperin on Instagram, who commented on one of my posts like forever ago, and they were like, Terra Moons is one of my favorite brands ever, but they really don't have too many true purples. And I was like, that is so true. I was reminded of that when I was swatching these shadows. Like, there really aren't too many true purples, but this is absolutely one of them. Like, if I'm looking for a true purple multichrome, this is one I would go for. And it has, I don't wear it too often because it's deeper and more opaque than the types of shadows I normally use, but it is one that I gravitate toward when I'm looking for something like that. Reign of Terra is described as a violet blue chameleon that shifts blue, orange, gold. By the way, I love this name. So I describe it as a mid-tone muted purple base, and it has soft shifts from orange to soft gold and slightly green. This is another one that has that like almost pearly finish. Really pretty. I don't wear this one too often, but there is a time and a place for it. This one does stain, not as intensely as Dione, but it did leave a bit of a stain on my hand, so just be aware of that. I forget if it's stained on my eyes. It's been a while since I've worn it, but it did stain my hand. Midnight Winter is described as a black base chameleon shade that shifts purple, blue, teal, and green. I describe it as a black base chameleon, and I only see purple, teal, and green shifts. This is so unique. This was so excited when it was launched. I remember like I was trying to understand what it looks like, and I picked it up because I couldn't figure it out. But you might be surprised to hear that I use this pretty often for the type of shade it is. Like I've mentioned a few times, I don't really like dark opaque shades, but something about this I just really find exciting to use and kind of like push me out of my comfort zone. Something to note about this, it feels like more emollient or like almost oily than the other shades. It doesn't crease on me, but I don't really ever get creasing, but it might, if you're prone to creasing, just be aware of that. Antares is described as a coral pink chameleon with green and gold shifts. I describe it as a mid-tone saturated corally hot pink base, and it shifts gold, green, blue. It's shiny and kind of sparkly and mostly opaque. So this is like one of those pink rainbow shifting shades that a lot of brands have their own version of. The thing that sets this one apart is the base is a lot warmer, more corally rather than pink, and it's a lot more opaque than some of the other shades. I also find that it has more of a gold presence, but ultimately it is one of those like pink rainbowy shifting shades. So you might, if you have a lot of multichromes, you might have something similar in your collection. I know in a few of my videos I've done comparisons, so just check my Shellwe video if you're interested to see how it compares to similar shades. Terrestrial is described as a fuchsia berry chameleon shadow with yellow, gold, blue, and green shifts, and I describe it as a muted fuchsia base with gold, green, teal, blue, purple shifts. Very, very shiny and reflective and also sparkly. This is also in that family of like pinkish rainbow shifting shades, but the base is a lot more muted and kind of like dialed down. So I personally see it as different enough to set it apart. It's quite similar to Bloodline from Clionadh. I compared it in one of my recent videos, but to be honest with you, I really prefer the formula and finish of Terrestrial. So if you're going to pick one or the other, I'd recommend Terrestrial, but I don't think you need both. Carina Nebula is described as a soft, quote, wearable, unquote, multichrome with deep blush, green, and gold shifts. I describe it as a mid-tone muted lilac base with orange, gold, green shifts. And it has that like smooth finish rather than super shiny. This is very similar in concept to the next two multichromes I'm going to show you, and out of the three this has become my favorite because it is the easiest for me to use. Maybe you will see more of a difference than I do, but I think of them as all like in the same family, just with slight variations. Tidal Flare is described as a reddish bronze, purple, gold, and orange chameleon shade. I describe it as a very deep, warm purple base, and it shifts from orange to gold, smooth and shiny finish. So this to me is very similar to Carina Nebula. Like I said, the base is deeper, and I feel like it is more of like a fiery orange. This used to be my favorite out of these like purpley orange shifting shades. This is one of my Instagram friends, Chris's favorite shades, and I always associate it with her. So there are a lot of diehard fans for Tidal Flare, but I think I have switched over to Team Carina Nebula. Helix Nebula is described as a deep purple chameleon with gold, green, and orange shifts. So I think of this as like the base of Tidal Flare with the shifts of Carina Nebula. Like I said, these are all related, just with small differences. I don't think you need all three, but they are really cool, grungy purple shades. Shattered Stars is described as a light greenish blue chameleon shadow that shifts pink, gold, purple, and teal. I describe it as a sheer muted plum base with shifts from gold, green, teal, purple. It's shiny and has a few colorful flecks, but overall not really sparkly. I think this is technically a purple eyeshadow, but I always think of it as a gray. I don't know why, but anyway, this is a really versatile and quote, wearable, unquote, shade. Like I would say it's in the neutral adjacent family. They recently came out with another shade that is so similar, and I prefer it a little bit more. But if you like a more smooth, shiny shade, you might like this one. Milky Way is described as a bluish teal gray base with reddish shifts and loads of sparkle. And I believe they also say on there that it is supposed to be designed like Celestial Cloudscape that I showed you earlier. So I think it is similar in concept to Celestial Cloudscape, but very different in execution. Celestial Cloudscape has that like satiny base and then the sparkles on top, whereas this has the whole formula is like that kind of spiky, flaky formula like Pollux, and it does have those flecks of sparkles mixed in, but the texture feels more uniform to me. So very, very different finish and texture in my opinion, but as you can see, it does have that like muted base and then the flecks of sparkle mixed throughout. Veil Nebula is described as a plum, maroon, blue, and green chameleon shade. I describe it as a muted, deep plum base with shifts from gold, green, blue, purple. Very sparkly with lots of different flecks. This, as I mentioned before, is like the cooler tone sibling to Gamma Ray. Like I think if you have Gamma Ray in this, you can pretty much spice up any neutral look because they will pair so perfectly with it. This is one of my top recommendations from Terra and one of my most used shades. I love it so much, even though it's like a deeper shade. It's so, so beautiful. It also has very similar vibes to Opulent from Clionadh, just a lot deeper base. I did a comparison post like forever ago on Instagram, but I consider them to be like in the same family, just with different depths of the base. Next up, we have Extreme Multichromes. By the way, if you're watching this video still, comment a moon emoji down below. I want to know how many people have stuck around this long. Also, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. You like indie makeup content, I make indie makeup content, so why not subscribe so you can see my next video. So Extreme Multichromes are described as mostly black base and some gray base multichromes that have the most intense shifting multichrome pigments. There's a significant range in texture and finish. I added that in, that's not from the brand. Lunar Luxe, most of these are going to be Lunar Luxe, with the exception of a few, but the Lunar Luxe are described as shadows that are the most expensive to make. The pigments used in this collection are the highest cost-wise per the brand. So some of the Lunar Luxe multichromes are less expensive than non-Lunar Luxe Extreme Multichromes, if that makes sense, and I'm assuming that's because there's less of this pigment used in it. That's just me guessing. I don't know if that's a fact, but that I assume is what accounts for the price discrepancy. You'll notice as we go through these, there are a lot of quite similar shades. One piece of feedback I do have for Terra Moons is I wish, if they're going to continue releasing a lot of shades that are similar, I wish they'd include comparisons on each shadow's page with the similar multichromes, because I don't think that the brand owner is expecting every person to buy every shade. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having variety, but I think people should be able to see if they're buying something that is nearly identical to something they already have. You know what I mean? So I really wish that is something they'd incorporate if they do plan to continue releasing a lot of these very similar shades. I always try to do as many comparisons as possible before a release if I'm fortunate enough to get it in PR ahead of time, but I don't want to assume I'm going to stay on the PR list, and that's just me doing that for my community. Like, I don't work for the brand. So also, not everyone has the skin complexion of mayonnaise. You know, I wish they would have maybe like a fair, medium, and deep skin tone. That way some people can see on someone who looks more like them. Shade on Mars is described as a gray base multichrome that shifts red, pink, and orange and has hints of blue. I have it described as a gray base multichrome that shifts red, orange, and gold. A very smooth and subtle finish. People did not like this. There was another one that came out with it, like Falling Star, I think, which is a purple version. People did not like these. I do like it. I think it's a great one and done shade. Definitely a lot more of like a subtle satin-y finish. And I did get this in PR. Maybe my feelings would be different if I paid the full price for it. But personally, I enjoy using this. And I think it's similar to, there's a shade from Clionadh called Statue Garden. I think the texture is very similar to that. Mirage is described as shifting pink, yellow, green, purple, and deep red. I have it described as a traditional black-based multichrome that shifts red, orange, gold, green. Very high shine and reflective. I've talked a lot before about how I feel regarding these traditional black-based multichromes. I personally am not a huge fan of this type of formula, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the easiest for me to use. I think there are so many new types of multichromes that have come out that are so much more user-friendly but still create that same intense impact. I will say, like, in terms of color theory, this is the most intensely shifting multichrome. It goes from red all the way to green on the opposite side of the color wheel, so you are not going to miss those shifts on your eyes. You're not going to have to do any like contortion or anything in order to see them. It's really pretty. It's just not my preferred type of multichrome. Zenith is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts deep teal, pink, green, and silver. I describe it as a black and teal base that shifts spicy pink, orange, gold, and green. Very flaky, sparkly, and shiny, and this is the softer type of flaky multichrome. So I mentioned earlier there's like a spiky type of flaky multichrome, and then there's a softer one. I 100% prefer the softer formula, and I'll try to distinguish it as I go through each one of these. This is the first shade that we're going to see in what I've called the sub-lunar family. You're going to start to be able to recognize them, but there are a bunch of shades that have these particular shifts just with different bases, and I will compare them all later in the video. Solar Expansion is described as shifting green, taupe, and pink, and I describe it as a black-based multichrome that shifts maroon, gold, and green. It's sparkly and flaky like that softer formula, but there is a big difference. It has like more oil in it, kind of like Midnight Winter, which I went over earlier. So the flakes are not as like easy to pick up, if that makes sense. It's still flaky, but it's more emollient and fused together more. I hope that makes sense. Protostar is described as a large mica particle sized multichrome that shifts olive, light pink, taupe, and gold. I describe it as a blackened green base with multicolor sparkles that shifts red, orange, gold, green. This is in the sublunar family in my opinion, but it has a lot of different flecks of sparkles mixed in, so it does set it apart. I do compare it later on. It reads very similar to Zenith's on the eyes. I did a video recently where I have one on one eye and one on the other, but I prefer Protostar because it has so much more dimension to it. So if you're gonna pick one, I think Protostar is my favorite. Hyperion is described as a bronze, pink, green, and gold multichrome. I describe it as, I think it's a black-based multichrome, and it shifts from rose gold to muted olive to green. This is probably the most neutral-ish black-based multichrome I've ever come across. It's a lot more subtle in terms of the shifts, so it's a lot easier to work with in terms of a black-based multichrome, and it's very, very shiny. I would consider this like a quote work-friendly unquote multichrome, even though I think you should be able to wear whatever the heck you want to work. I recognize that we live in a society, so yeah, those are my thoughts. Galactic Blossom is described as a peachy multichrome with gold, green, blue, and purple shifts. I describe it as a soft peach base that shifts gold, green, teal, blue. This is in the same family as those like pink rainbow shifting multichromes, but the base is obviously more peach. And I didn't pick this up because I thought it would be too similar to some of the pink multichromes I have, but I think it is different enough that I can see a difference on my eyes, and I'm really glad that I received it. Very small particle size and shiny, but also has a little bit of sparkle to it. Really pretty soft multichrome. Proxima is described as an extreme flaky multichrome shade that has a large mica particle size and very intense orange, red, gold shift. Very bright and fiery. And I describe it as a spicy hot orange that shifts to gold, green, teal. This is that spiky, flaky formula that I mentioned earlier. The first time I swatched this on my eyes, it's in my Terra Moon Spring 2023 video, I thought it was more similar to the soft, flaky multichrome formula, but the next time I used it, I realized it's definitely not. It's more of the like hard, spiky kind, so just be aware of that. The color is so cool. It is so vibrant and spicy, but honestly, I've only reached for it one other time because I just don't enjoy using that formula. It's not user-friendly for me at my skill level. Arcturus is described as a large mica particle size multichrome. It shifts fiery orange, red, and gold. I describe it as a spicy, vibrant red base that shifts gold, green, teal, blue, purple. This shade absolutely blew me away when I first saw it. Like, it is so vibrant and intense and shifty. It's unlike anything. Well, it's actually very similar to the next shade I'm going to show you, but like, other than this next shade, like, it's unlike anything else I've seen. It is insane. So vibrant on the eyes, and it's not really a color I wear too often, but it makes me want to go out of my comfort zone just so I can use it, because just look at how shifty and incredible it is. Venus in Chains is described as a large mica particle size that shifts deep red, orange with gold, green, and blue shifts, and I describe it as a deep maroon base that shifts gold, green, teal, blue, purple. In my opinion, exactly the same as Arcturus with a deeper base. I did spark a little bit of discourse when I said this because I told people that I don't think you need both, just pick one or the other. Some people disagreed with me, that's fine. I personally think you don't need both. I think if you like a more like light, vibrant base, Arcturus is the one, and if you like a more like sultry, deeper base, go with Venus in Chains. My favorite is Arcturus, but I tend to like a lighter, brighter look. Martian Dust is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts burnt orange, jewel tone red, gold, and green, and I describe it as a sheer black base that shifts red, orange, gold, green. It's flaky and sparkly and shiny in that softer type of flaky multichrome formula, and this is again a very, very close sibling to the next one I'm going to show you. Like, again, I don't think you need both. This is in the sublunar family. Aurora Australis is described as a large mica particle size that shifts deep berry, light green, and coppery orange. This is a deeper black base in my opinion, and it shifts red, orange, gold, green. Again in the sublunar family, and this is a bit cooler tone and deeper than Martian Dust. I would say if you're trying to decide between them, same thing. If you like a lighter, brighter look, go with Martian Dust, and a more like sultry, deeper look, go with Aurora Australis. Aurum Regalia is described as a soft, wearable multichrome with a peach, gold, and green shift. and I describe it as a peachy orange to gold to green shifting multichrome. Very, very shiny. Like, it feels more shiny than a lot of the other multichromes I have. It feels very finely milled and is not very opaque, more on the sheer side. So this is one I feel like you really can't do wrong with no matter how you apply it. Definitely one of the most user-friendly extreme multichromes that Terra Moons has available. Musifii is described as a large particle size multichrome shifting reddish orange, yellow, and light green. I describe it as a sheer peach base that shifts spicy orange to gold to green. This is in the Sublunar family. It's very, very similar to Sublunar, which I'll show you later. It just has that bit of a sheer peach base and a smaller mica particle size than Sublunar. Anyway, this is one of my absolute favorites. I wear it all the time, as you can see from the amount of pan I have. Really, really enjoy this one. One of my favorites from that shift family. And I don't know if I said this already, but it's the more soft, flaky formula. Lyra is described as a sparkly, sheer yellow base that shifts green, teal, blue, and purple. Has larger particles of mica, making it more sparkly. And yeah, I describe it as a sheer yellow base that shifts vibrant teal, blue, purple. This is not a unique shade by any means, but I will say this is like the most intense, reflective, vibrant, shiny version of the shade I have. And I think I have like 4 different versions of this from different brands, but Lyra is like absolutely the most intense, and it almost has like a UV quality to it. I think if you are looking for this type of shade, like, this is the best version that I know of. It's sheer enough that it makes a great topper shade, but I don't think it works in the same way as an iridescent in that it has that slight base, so that's going to play a role in how it looks. Either way, really fun to layer over different things. Solar Delirium is described as a large mica particle size that shifts yellow, orange, light green, and blue. I describe it as a sheer orange that shifts gold, green, teal. It looks orange in the pan, but to me it reads very like yellow gold. Like, I don't see too much of that orange showing through. This is one of my absolute favorites and top recommendations. It has that softer, flaky formula, and I just love pairing this with different bases and seeing what I can do with it. Use it all the time, as you can see. I really like that it's vibrant and shifty, but not so opaque, so it can be layered over a lot of different things, which is one of my favorite things in an eyeshadow. Titan is described as a yellow, green, blue multichrome. I describe it as a gray base multichrome that shifts gold, green, teal. Very high shine and semi-opaque. You wouldn't guess from looking at it in the pan, but it's almost identical to Solar Delirium in the color, but the formula and finish is very different. It's got a much smaller particle size and more shiny finish rather than like flaky and sparkly. I will compare them later, but yeah, I was surprised how similar these are. Ophiuchus is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts green, gold, teal, and lime. I describe it as a blackened green base that shifts gold, green, teal, blue. This one has that softer, flaky formula. I feel like based on the way this is described, you wouldn't expect it to be very unique, but I do find it to be quite unique to my collection. Like, this combination of base and shifts, I don't have anything quite like it. And it is so shifty and shiny on the eyes, makes a great one and done. Space Case is described as a gray base multichrome that shifts yellow, green, and blue and has hints of purple. That's pretty much exactly how I would describe it as well. This is a great one for anyone just dipping their toes into multichromes. Maybe you are intimidated by them. This is going to be a really good one because it's neutral adjacent. It has that little bit of color in the shifts, but it's very easy to use and pair with a lot of different tones. So I definitely recommend this if you're not sure where to start. This has a very, very shiny and smooth formula, small particle size, super reflective on the eyes. Coalescence is described as a chartreuse green multichrome with pink, gold, and green shifts. This shadow is very sparkly with larger particles of mica. And yeah, I describe it as a lime green base. It has pink, gold, green, teal shifts, and it has some gold sparkles in it as well. This is, okay, here's another shift family for you. This is going to be called the Cosmos family because there is a shade we'll go over later called the Cosmos that has these same shifts. But anyway, this has this soft, flaky formula, very, very sparkly on the eyes. I picked this up because I was not sure what it was going to actually look like. As you can see, I tend to do that a lot. Don't recommend. It is basically like the green sibling to the Cosmos, and there are quite a few different shades in this same shift family, so I'll compare them all later. M51 is a gray base multichrome that shifts green, purple, and red and has hints of blue. I would agree with that description. So this is another gray base one that has that really shiny finish, not totally opaque, and a very small particle size. This is one of my all-time favorite multichromes. One of the very first ones I would replace if I lost my whole collection. Like, it's an absolute necessity for me in my collection, even with how large it is. I just don't have anything quite like this, and I love how it's like grounded and neutral adjacent, but it still has that bit of color and almost like ethereal quality to it while still being grungy. It's just everything I love in a multichrome, and I just get really hyped up every time I talk about it because I just adore it. So I definitely recommend this. Big Bang is described as a green, blue, purple, and pink multichrome. Yeah, this is another gray base one that shifts green, blue, purple, pink. This was my M51 before M51 came along, if that makes sense. Like, it's very similar. It's just a little bit more green. It does the same thing, but I just prefer M51 because it has a little bit more nuance to it. Both are really beautiful shades. I don't think you need both because they are quite similar. Cosmic Dancer is described as a gray base multichrome that shifts blue, green, and purple. This one always makes me want to sing "Hold Me Closer, Cosmic Dancer." Wow, bars. Anyway, this is kind of like if you took Big Bang and shifted a little bit over on the color wheel to be cooler. It's like instead of green, it's teal to blue to purple. It's very beautiful. This pairs so well with burgundy tones. But yeah, it's got that same like really reflective, shiny, smooth finish, small particle size, very approachable and wearable. This is like the most elevated version of a blue-brown shifting duochrome multichrome that you will find, in my opinion. Bellatrix is described as a larger mica particle size multichrome that shifts blue, green, pink, purple. I describe it as a warm purpley plum base that shifts blue, purple, plum. This is not the most shifty, but it's so pretty on the eyes and dimensional. I remember wearing this and I just kept looking at myself in the mirror thinking about how beautiful it is. It's one of these softer types of flaky multichromes, and it's going to be very similar to the next one I show you, just with a lighter base, so just keep that in mind. Interdimensional is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts blue, green, pink, purple. It is similar to Bellatrix, but a deeper version. See, I like that they said that it's very similar to Bellatrix because it is. It's literally identical, just with that deeper base. Definitely don't need both. Like, if you get Bellatrix, you can just put it over a deeper base and achieve the exact same effect. Out of the two, I prefer Bellatrix just because it has that versatility, but honestly, it's just a preference thing. They're both really pretty. Oppie is described as a larger mica particle size that shifts lime, silver, pink. I like that it has that very desaturated light pastel like teal base, and then it has those beautiful shifts. It's in the Cosmos family. I will compare it later on. The tone of this, like the base, is so unique. It has that softer flaky formula that reads pretty sparkly on the eyes. Yeah, I enjoy this one. Eris is described as an extreme flaky multichrome shade that has a large mica particle size, has a grungy green with a gray base that shifts orange, red, gold. I describe it as a very sheer grayish blue that shifts spicy orange, gold, green, teal. This has that spiky, flaky formula that I mentioned earlier that I don't love. And I think that the larger mica particles allow it to be more intense and shifty. Just unfortunately, I don't like using it. But because like there's more surface area catching and reflecting the light, science, math, bloop, blop, you know what I mean? So very fiery and intense shade. Ganymede is described as a large mica particle size that shifts light green, orangey, gold, and pink. I describe it as a sheer teal base that shifts spicy pink, orange, gold, green, has the softer flaky formula. I adore this shade. I was reaching for it literally all the time last summer. It is so intense, and I like that the base is not fully opaque, but it still shows through. I was just like trying to pair this with like literally everything to see how it looked. It's so fun. This is another one in the sub-Lunar family, so she has a lot of close relatives. Perihelion is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts teal, bright blue, green, and hints of light purple. I describe it as a warm tealish blue base that shifts spicy pink, orange, gold, green. This has a more intense teal base, and to me it reads more pink than orange compared to Ganymede, but they are quite similar. I will compare them later on. One thing you'll notice going forward is that there are a ton of shades in this category, like the teal and blue spicy shifting shades, so buckle up. Big Dipper is described as a teal multichrome with lilac, green, and blue shifts. This shadow is very sparkly with larger particles of mica. Yeah, I have it described as a warm tealish blue base that shifts pink, gold, green, has a softer, flaky formula. This has probably the most opaque base in terms of like all these spicy teal shades. The shifts are softer, more pink rather than orange. This is in the Cosmos family, and I do compare this on my eyes with Perihelion in one of my more recent videos, so check that out if you want to see how they look side to side on actually applied on the eyes. Moon Mosaic is described as a vibrant teal-based multichrome with purple, blue, and soft pink and silver shifts. I describe it as a deep teal base with cool pink, purple, and warm blue shifts. This is a smooth and shiny finish, more smooth I would say, and I have written down on my notes that it's kind of harder to pick up, like maybe a little bit more hard pressed than some of the other extreme multichromes. The Cosmos is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts light blue, lavender, green, and gold. I describe it as a semi-sheer sky blue base with pink to gold to green to teal shifts and gold sparkles. Man, this like really set the tone for the way that Terra Moons did all their future releases. I feel like I think this is the first like flaky multichrome that they did, and all of us went crazy, or most of us went crazy over this. Like I remember I was obsessing over it for months and months. And the reason why I call it the Cosmos family is because I feel like I said, it set the tone for so many of their future releases just based on the response we had to this. Anyway, this is just legendary. Softer mica particle size, by the way. Stellar Apotheosis is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts blue, pink, orangey red, light green, and purple. And I describe it as a sky blue base that shifts spicy pink, orange, gold, green. This is in the Lunar family. And the base is like moderately opaque, not fully opaque. I remember recently Nikki Tutorials, I think she like got sent this collection and she put it on her lips over a black base and she was like, wait, where's the blue? Or she was like surprised that it showed up so orange. And yeah, that's because the base is not fully opaque. This is quite similar to Ganymede, but the base is a lot cooler tone, more blue rather than teal, and slightly more opaque. Of course, I compare them all later. Pistol Star is described as an extreme flaky multichrome shade that has a very large mica particle size. It has silvery lilac base with gold, green shift and hints of pink, more silver than blue or purple. And I describe it as a silvery mid-tone blue that shifts to a cool tone pink, gold, green. So this is kind of similar to the Cosmos, but there are two main differences. One, it's a lot cooler tone as described. And two, it has that spiky, flaky formula with the very large particle size. I will say, while this isn't my favorite to work with, I did wear this in a look with no glitter glue. I just like tapped it on my eyes and it stayed in place all day, surprisingly. Take my word with a grain of salt because I don't really crease that much, but I was surprised it did not like transfer or crease at all. Hyperbolite is described as a large mica particle size that shifts blue, purple, light blue, and pink. I describe it as a periwinkle that shifts blue, periwinkle, and pink. Has the softer, flaky formula. Honestly, I don't know why I have so much pan in this because I feel like I don't really wear it that often. Like, it's pretty, it's just not the most exciting to me. But, I mean, if you like these tones, it's got that softer formula, so you'll probably enjoy it. Wanderstar is described as a muted blue-based multichrome that shifts from pink to orange to gold to green. I describe it as a muted denim blue base with warm pink to orange to gold to green shifts. Has a small particle size and a smooth, shiny finish, and it's mostly opaque. This is very underrated. I don't see too many people talking about this, but it's so unique and slightly grungy and kind of weird. It reminds me a lot in a way of La Lune, and I will compare them later on, but this one deserves a lot more hype in my opinion. Cosmic Collision is described as a large mica particle size multichrome that shifts lavender, green, teal, and blue. Has a semi-sheer, this is my description, it has a semi-sheer purple base that shifts gold, green, teal, blue, purple. It has the soft type of formula and a lot of multicolored different sparkles. This is not a unique multichrome, but it's the only one I have, and it is like literally so shifty and beautiful. Kind of similar to Shattered Stars, but it is more purple, and I do compare them later on. Phantom Galaxy is described as a deep eggplant purple multichrome with green, blue, and soft yellow shifts. Has a smooth finish, and yeah, I describe it as a black and purple base with purple, blue, teal shifts and a little bit of gold too from a harsh angle. Has that smooth formula, not the most reflective, but still shiny. And it's definitely opaque. It's one of the more opaque ones from the extreme multichromes. This is actually pretty similar to Midnight Winter, so I do compare them toward the end of this video, so just keep an eye out for that. Witch's Broom Nebula is described as an indigo chameleon with teal, blue, purple, and hints of pink shifts. I describe it as a deep saturated bluish purple base with a lot of multicolored sparkles, and it shifts pink, gold, green. This is like the emo version of the Cosmos. Like, it's got that like deep moody base, but then it has those same shifts and so many different colored sparkles going on. I do compare them later on. So yeah, this is in the Cosmos family. I think it's a flaky shade, but I don't consider it to be as flaky, like as large particle size as some of the more flaky shades. I'd say it's more of like a sparkly flaky type of shade. Larger particle size, but not quite as intense as some of the shades we went over before. Hyperspace is described as a very sparkly multichrome that shifts purple, pink, yellow, green, blue. I describe it as a deep purple that shifts spicy pink, orange, gold, green. So this is in the Sublunar family. It's very close to Zenith, and I will compare them later on. It's just a little bit more purple leaning. In my opinion, you definitely don't need both. Like, I'd say you don't really need too many from these different shift families because you can recreate them by layering one shade over another base. But that's just my opinion. You do you. Vela Supernova is described as a deep berry multichrome with orange, green, and pink shifts. I describe it as a magenta that shifts pink, gold, green, teal. This is in the Cosmos family. Kind of hard to tell because the base kind of like matches the primary shift, but it is, and I do compare it later on. This has that soft, flaky formula, and I would say this is a version of that very common type of multichrome, like the magenta, gold, green that we see so often. Like, every brand has their own version of it, but what makes this unique is the sheer-ish base and the texture, and it's a little bit like softer in the shift. Really beautiful on the eyes. It has like a dragon scale effect. Flare Star is described as a large mica particle sized multichrome that shifts pink, light orange, and green. I describe it as a hot pink that shifts spicy orange, gold, green. You guessed it, part of the Sublunar family. This has the softer type of flaky formula, and it is so vibrant and intense. I like that it has that sheerness to it that allows it to be layered over different bases and kind of like transform them, but it still does have that really, really intense hot pink aspect to it. Winter Sun is described as an extreme flaky multichrome shade that has a large mica particle size. It has hot pink, red, orange, gold shift. I describe it as, honestly, IDK shifts spicy orange, gold, green, teal. I don't know. It's like maybe a really weird gray base. Hard to describe. Like, it doesn't really have much of a base, but as you can see, it's in that Sublunar family, and it's kind of similar to Flare Star, but a lot more intense. It has that spiky formula that I don't love, but that allows it to be more like vibrant and shifty, I believe, because of science. So if you like flaky shades, maybe you would prefer this over some of the more similar shades from Sublunar family. Venus is described as a pink, gold, green, and orange multichrome. I describe it as a gray base multichrome that shifts the same pink, orange, gold, green. Very high shine, semi-opaque. This is like such a classic. Like, this is one of my first extreme multichromes ever, and I was blown away by it. I mean, obviously they've come out with so many different ones ever since then, but it's still like, it stands the test of time. If you like a more smooth formula, you're not into the flakes, pick this up instead of the last two I showed you, because you will get along with this formula great. Very small particle size, very smooth and shiny. Atomic Division is described as a silvery blue chameleon with grungy green undertones. So it says it's a chameleon, but it's under the extreme multichrome. So honestly, I don't know. That's where you can find it on the website. It has, okay, so I describe it as a pewter base question mark with orange, gold, green shifts and gold flecks. This shade is so slept on. Like, I don't see really anyone talking about this, but it's so unique and grungy and special, and just like all of the things I love about Terra Moons are embodied in this eyeshadow. It's got a smooth, shiny formula, but it has a lot of those like flecks mixed in. easy to work with, easy to shear out, just fantastic. 10 out of 10 recommend. Prism Skies is described as smoother mica. It is similar to Shattered Stars but more purple. Ships blue, green, silver. Give them props for saying that it's similar to Shattered Stars, because 100% it is almost identical to Shattered Stars, slightly deeper and more purple base, and it has some more like different colored flecks mixed in. They are so similar. You absolutely do not need both. And in one of my more recent videos, I do one on one eye and one on the other, just so you can see exactly how similar they are in application. If I had to pick just one, I think I would choose Prism Skies because it has more dimension and nuance to it. Oh my god, okay, we made it to the last section. These are all my iridescents from Terra Moons. In my description, I say the iridescent multichromes are all very smooth with a small particle size, high shine. There's one exception, Sublunar. The iridescent duochromes are more peachy and sparkly with a slightly larger particle size. So let's go ahead and get into those because we still have a ton of comparisons to do afterwards. Red Giant is described as a red, gold, pink shade. Sorry if you can hear my dog eating in the background. Anyway, yeah, I would describe it as a like cooler leaning red to orange to gold, and you can see a tiny bit of green from a harsh angle. This is like a very, very iconic shade from Terra Moons. I remember like a lot of people are going crazy over this. Now a few brands have their own version of this. It's not the most unique, but it is. I love a red iridescent, and it is very high shine, very intense red, beautiful, fun to layer over different bases. Sublunar is described as an iridescent multichrome that ships hot pink, green, orange, and gold with a very sparkly finish. And I say it is an iridescent that ships spicy pink, orange, gold, green. So this is not the spiky flaky formula, but it has a larger particle size than the like soft flaky formula. So I would say it's like somewhere in between. It's not going to smooth out as easily as like the Cosmos or a shade like that, but it's not as hard feeling, if that makes sense. Anyway, this is iconic. There are so many shades that have these shifts. Like really, I think that I know a lot of people don't like to do all the work that it takes to like layer an iridescent over different bases, but really I think you could just pick this up and recreate so many shades. Solar Flare is described as a pink, gold, yellow, green shade, and I describe it as a peachy orange to gold to green shifting multichrome. This one, I don't really talk about this too often, but this is like one of my most used because it's so like very easy to pair with like anything without it overtaking or like changing the direction of the look, yet it still has those like intense orange to green to blue shifts. Also makes a gorgeous face highlighter. I love using this as a highlighter on my face. Don't have any dupes to this in my massive iridescent multichrome collection, so I think this is a great one from Terra Moons specifically. Phoenix is described as shifting orange, blue, and gold, and I describe it as shifting from fiery orange to gold to green to bluish silver. This is hands down the most intense, shiny, reflective, just like insane iridescent multichrome from Terra Moons. One of the most insane in my entire collection. Like, I don't know if it's translating here, but it is like so intense. Like it almost has, it's an iridescent, but it almost feels like it has like a bluish silver base, and then that like really punchy fiery orange from straight on to gold. Like it is insane. If you put this over a glitter glue, it's going to be like fully opaque, but it can be sheared out, I've found. Time Shift is described as shifts of green, blue, gold with hints of purple. And yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. Very high shine, and this is like kind of similar to Luxe from Clionadh if you watch my Clionadh video, but it's not quite as green. It's more of a gold, and it's just slightly different in the shifts. So this is, I think, a little bit more versatile than like a Luxe type of iridescent, but I don't know if you're not like a super iridescent eyeshadow person, if you really need both. It's similar to the shade Light Year, which I know is a dupe to Luxe, but I don't have that one, but it is more like gold, like I said. Selene is described as a golden indigo shimmer. This is in their Duochrome section, but I think it's a multichrome that has multiple shifts. Honestly, I really don't know how to describe this. I put muted gold to teal to lilac. This is kind of like a dialed down version of the shade I just showed you, Time Shift, in a little bit cooler tone. Such a versatile shade. Like it literally goes with everything. If I'm not sure like what to use for an inner corner or like just like a topper shade, I always go for a Selene because I feel like it just goes with literally everything. Atlas is described as a blue-green shimmer. This is another one that is in the Duochrome section. I describe it as a iridescent teal to blue. It is sparkly and piecey and very wet looking. Like if you want a wet look on your eyes, you can just use this as a topper and it will create that effect. This is a one that is very similar to Half Moon, if you remember from earlier. So I don't think you need both. Like if you have Half Moon, you don't need Atlas, and vice versa. They're super similar, just Half Moon has that very slight teal base. Zero Gravity is described as a violet, blue, purple, pink shade. I describe it as an indigo, purple, pink, peach. Yes, those are fibers from my garbage. Yes, I dropped it and picked it out. Just mind your business. So this is not going to be as shiny as some of the other iridescents, and that's just because of the specific like bluish pigment that's used, but it is like almost a UV type quality from straight on, and then it's fully transparent from other angles. Europa is described as a golden red shimmer, and I describe it as a pink to orange to gold. This is in the Duochrome section, so it has a bit more of a piecey sparkly finish, but it's not super textured. It actually works great as a highlighter. This is not a unique type of iridescent, but it is really pretty and easy to pair with a lot of different things. Lunar Spectrum is described as a pink, green, and gold shifting shade, and I describe it as a pink, orange, gold, green, teal. This is similar to Solar Flare, but it's more pink than orange. Very, very shiny and smooth. One of my most used iridescents, and this actually has the same shifts as the Cosmos family, but obviously it has that very smooth, shiny formula rather than being flaky. I lied. We have one more section to go through before we get to comparisons. This is my matte shadow collection from Terra Moons. A lot of you know I don't care about matte eyeshadow. It's not really my favorite thing, but I do really enjoy Terra Moons matte formula. Very pigmented, which normally I prefer a more buildable formula, but I think where they really excel is in their neon formula and their pastels, which are unfortunately discontinued. I did include them for comparison's sake, but the formula is on the thicker side and it's very fragile. That's the one drawback to it. Every other neon formula I've tried is not good. Like it's impossible to build up, and they just didn't perform. Like the Blend Bunny neons, I did not like. I decluttered all of those. Terra Moons changed the game. They really are just like the best neons I've ever used. They go on exactly how they look in the pan, and they're so pigmented, so easy to build up and blend into other colors. If you're gonna get any mattes from Terra Moons, I definitely recommend checking out the neons. I don't have all of them because I'm not like wearing neons on an everyday basis, but I know that if I need like a very punchy neon matte eyeshadow, they will never fail me. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into these swatches. Okay, so I'm not going to say too much about these, but anything that's italic is a discontinued shade that I included for comparison. Beetlejuice is a dupe for Carnelian in the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. Jupiter and I is a really unique peachy pink neon shade. Infrared is a bit cooler tone and harder press. Cardinal Sunset is a super vibrant primary red, and Cepheus is more of like a deep vampy maroon. Estella is a green-leaning chartreuse shade. Shire and Arctic Lime are basically identical. I don't think you need both. Shire is more green, Arctic Lime is more yellow. Among the Stars is a really, really vibrant like highlighter yellow shade, and Capella is just like a primary yellow matte. Okay, so these are all neons besides the discontinued shade, Lunar or Later. They're all like warm blues or teals. Neptune's Waves is so unique and beautiful. Azure Skies is like a lighter sky blue. Just a Phase is more blue leaning, and Fourth Dimension is more green leaning. I would consider them both teals though. Rigel is like a very muted grungy indigo. Royal is a cool tone deep purple. Star Sailors is a very vibrant like grape purple. Star Crazy and Lunar Haze are neons even though they look pastel. Star Sailors is warmer and Lunar Haze is cooler, more of like a periwinkle. Perseus and Phobos are both pretty neutral grays. Moon Reverie is a warm like wine tone purple. Spacebound is a neon lavender pinkish tone. Utopia is a pastel, discontinued. Ascension is a very light pale like pinkish purple. Alright, we've got a lot of comparisons to get through. I'm not going to say too much about these, so we're going to go by color category first, then by shift family, and then I have even more that I just like didn't include because they didn't fit. So let's get into it. First off, we have cool tone reds. From left to right, we have Cerise Waves, Crimson Eclipse, Aurora Australis, Mirage, Space Drifter, Made on Mars, and Red Giant all the way up by my wrist. Okay, and if a shade is in italic, it means it was discontinued, and that's why I didn't talk about it before. From left to right, we have Venus in Chains, Arcturus, Harvest Moon, and Martian Dust up by my wrist. Don't worry, I'll compare Martian Dust to Aurora Australis in the shift comparisons. Okay, here we have shades that I didn't know where to put. I guess they're technically reds, but from left to right, we have Zenith, Solar Expansion, Exoplanet, and Protostar. Here we have some cooler tone oranges / corals. From left to right, we have Proxima, Axis, Sirius, Galactic Blossom, Musifii, and then all the way up by my wrist, we have Sublunar. Here are some warmer / bronzy oranges. We have from left to right, Gamma Ray, Inertia, Sun Scorch. By the way, I'm so sad those two got discontinued. Mercury, Meteorite, Aurum Regalia, Solar Flare, and Phoenix. Here are some gold shades. From left to right, we have Titan, Hot Spice Cider, Cosmic Noon, and Cesium. Okay, here are some yellowish tones. From left to right, we have Pollux, Titan. I swatched it again because I remember that it's really similar to Solar Delirium. Solar Delirium, Lyra, Lightspeed, and then all the way up by my wrist, we have Time Shift. Here are some warm greens. From left to right, we have Siren, M51, Space Case, Ophiuchus, Critical Mass, Castor, and then Selene at the top by my wrist. Cooler tone greens. From left to right, we have Midnight Winter, Big Bang, La Lune, Quasar, Radial Velocity, Dragonfly, Coalescence, and Serpens. Here are some teals / warm blues. From left to right, we have Interdimensional, Bellatrix, Neptune's Diamonds, Artemis, Cosmic Dancer, Half Moon, and Atlas. Some more teals. From left to right, we have Eris, Ganymede, Perihelion, Big Dipper, Oppie, and Enceladus. Okay, here are some blues. From left to right, we have Hyperbolide, Calypso, Star Sign, Stellar Apotheosis, the Cosmos, Rhea, and Magnetosphere. Even more blues. From left to right, we have Moon Mosaic, Witch's Broom Nebula, Wanderstar, Pistol Star, Ceres, and X-Ray. Oh, you thought we were done with blues? No. Okay, so from left to right, we have Adhara, Wormhole, Multiverse, Dark Matter, Moon Lily, and Moonshine. Okay, we have some indigos and purples. From left to right, we have Chasing Comets, Phantom Galaxy, Reign of Terra, Celestial Cloudscape, Moontide, Cosmic Collision, Lunar Lavender, and Infinity. Here are some warmer purples. From left to right, we have Crushed Velvet, Vela Supernova, Hyperspace, Helix Nebula, Tidal Flare, Carina Nebula, and Starlit. Here are some pink tones. From left to right, we have Lost in Space, Halley's Comet, Aphelion, Celestial Petal, Starburst, and Rosette. More pinks. From left to right, we have Flare Star, Antares, Terrestrial, Winter Sun, Venus, Lunar Spectrum, and Europa. Okay, now we're getting into shades that I didn't know how to categorize, so I just put them in like a neutral adjacent category. From left to right, we have Veil Nebula, Hyperion, Atomic Division, Shattered Stars, and Prism Skies. Last group of comparisons by color. From left to right, we have Milky Way, Dark Side, Carbon, and Mocha Twilight. Next up, we have comparisons by shift type, so not every single shadow is going to be included in here, just ones that stood out to me as being in the same family. I don't have a name for this family, but it's like gold, green, teal, blue shifting multichromes. Unfortunately, I can't fit all of them on the same arm. So first group we have Moontide, Cosmic Collision, Prism Skies, Shattered Stars, and Enceladus. Part 2 of the gold, green, teal, blue shifters. Let me know if you have a name for this family, maybe the light year family. So from left to right, we have Veil Nebula, Gamma Ray, Venus in Chains, Arcturus, Galactic Blossom, Antares, and Terrestrial. See what I mean about how Veil Nebula and Gamma Ray are like the warmer / cooler versions of each other? Here's the Cosmos family. There are less in this than I thought there would be. Left to right, we have Vela Supernova, Witch's Broom Nebula, the Cosmos, Big Dipper, Oppie, and Coalescence. Let me know if you think I missed any. Part 1 of the Sublunar family. From left to right, we have Ganymede, Stellar Apotheosis, Flare Star, Winter Sun, Musifii, and Sublunar. Part 2 of the Sublunar family. From left to right, Martian Dust, Aurora Australis, Hyperspace, Zenith, and Protostar. Okay, and as if there weren't enough comparisons already, there are even more. These are ones that I either didn't include before because they weren't in the same color group, or I just think are worth taking a look at next to each other. So let's go ahead and get into those, and then we'll wrap this video up. Okay, first up on my index finger, which is on the top, is Phantom Galaxy, and on my middle finger on the bottom is Midnight Winter. So these I thought have very similar vibes in that they're like purples that shift to green or teal. Midnight Winter reads a lot warmer to me, and I think if I had to pick just one, I would pick Midnight Winter. This one I thought was interesting. On my index finger I have Quasar, and on my middle finger I have Oppie. I thought these were similar in that they both have that like cool tone pastel base and a pink shift. The pink in Quasar is a lot cooler tone than in Oppie, and the texture is very different. Okay, here we have the Cosmos on top, Pistol Star on the bottom. Pistol Star is a lot cooler tone, but similar vibes to the Cosmos, and the texture is different. It has that spiky formula. The Cosmos is softer. Okay, I mentioned that Wanderstar and La Lune were similar, so here they are together. Wanderstar is on top, La Lune is on the bottom. So Wanderstar has a much lighter and more prominent blue base, but they have similar vibes. On top we have Dark Matter, and on the bottom we have Interstellar. I mentioned these are kind of similar. Dark Matter is much cooler tone, and it has that smoother, more like satin formula. Interstellar has that prominent shift to it, and it's shinier. There are 3 of the gray-based multichromes. On top we have Big Bang, in the middle M51, and on the bottom Cosmic Dancer. So you can see that Big Bang is a lot more prominent green, M51 is more like neutral adjacent, and Cosmic Dancer is more teal, but they are all quite similar. Moontide on top, Neptune's Diamonds on the bottom. I just wanted to show how these are like very similar vibes, just one is teal and one is purple. Last comparison, I did this in my Terra Moon spring video, but I just want to show it again. Celestial Cloudscape on top and Milky Way on the bottom. So you can see these are a very similar concept, but the texture is quite different. Milky Way is flaky, and Celestial Cloudscape is like that satin formula with the sparkles on top. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This is literally the biggest project I've ever done in my entire indie makeup career, so I hope it was a helpful resource. I hope you can refer back to it, maybe if you're planning to place an order or work on your wish list, or if you just want someone to talk about indie makeup in the background while you do something else. Either way, I really appreciate you for being here. I hope you'll subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!